I'm Stuart Malina, Music Director of the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra, and I come to you today, socially distanced, from my living room here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Obviously, we're living through very, very difficult and strange times right now, but one of the interesting things about times like this is it affords us the opportunity of trying out new ideas and new directions. And with that, we decided that we would embark on this series of videos, this will be the first of them, exploring various personalities within the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra family. We'll introduce you to some of our musicians, perhaps some of our board members and volunteers. And if you're watching this in real time, as I will be, you can leave questions in the real-time chat next to the screen, and I will do my best to answer them in real time. As many of you know, last year was the last year of Jeff Woodruff's 17-year tenure as executive director of the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra. It was a time of incredible prosperity, and he was a wonderful leader of our organization during the time of his leadership. With his retirement, we have hired a new executive director, and it's my great honor today to introduce our first guest in this series, our new executive director, Mr. Matthew Herren. So, welcome to town.
Thank you.
You grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I did.
Tell us about that.
It's a great place to grow up. I mean, that's not news to anyone who lives in this area. I graduated McCaskey in 1989 and spent a year in Philadelphia studying. I was studying cello at the time, which is how I got into music in the first place. And then I went to New York for school and for work, and then life took me to Lawrence, Kansas, and Fayetteville, Arkansas, and now back to Harrisburg. So this has been 25, 30 years.
And a circuitous route.
Right.
So when you were growing up, you actually pursued music, and
Right.
One of the things we liked best about your candidacy for this position is you actually had intimate experience with the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra.
I certainly did. I began playing in the Harrisburg Symphony in about 1994, and that was probably 4 or 5 seasons worth of concerts. So I was one of those people at that time from New York who came down on the train or by carpool or whatever and played in the Forum.
And this was during the Rick Westerfield years as music director?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And so why did you choose the cello? What drew you to that particular instrument?
I still remembered in 6th grade, Lancaster Public Schools, they did one of those sort of spring, would you like to play an instrument assemblies, and all the strings were demonstrated. I like low notes, I think is what it is.
Yeah, well, you have a low voice, perhaps that...
Maybe that's what it is.
Although at that time, probably not.
I did not, at age 11 or 12. No, I think it was the range, it was the register, and then it's sort of the idea of a supporting role. You know, playing bass lines a lot, I think, makes one able to kind of support other people and not we don't get the melody very often, you know. And maybe that's why I moved to administration, but that's another question, right? And it's sort of a transferable skill. You make the other people look good, you do the work behind the scenes.
There's a lot of that to it.
Yeah.
When you were studying cello as a youngster,
yes.
Was there a moment when you decided or figured out that this is what you wanted to pursue?
I'm laughing because there was not. It kind of just happened for me. I'm very lucky that my parents, who are not musicians, just were guided in the right direction from the start. And so one teacher took me to another teacher to another, and they did as they were told, and then it became a foregone conclusion around 9th or 10th grade that you were going to go to conservatory. This is what's going to happen to you, which was great. I was fine with that.
And you didn't just go to conservatory, you went to what many people consider the conservatory.
That would be the Juilliard School, yes.
And what was that like? What was it like being at Juilliard?
It was fantastic. I'm glad I was young enough not to be scared by being surrounded by incredible, famous people in the field. I found it really supportive. I had a great group of friends who are still my friends. In this business, I think between summer camps and conservatories, you kind of meet everyone you'll ever meet before you're about age 20. Do you agree?
I agree. Well, actually, no, because graduate school for me was a big opportunity to meet a lot of my closest musical friends now. But I know what you're talking about. Certainly for string players,
yes.
Those summer programs were enormous opportunities to meet the other contemporaries doing what you were doing.
Yeah. And Juilliard was fantastic. I mean, we were in New York, but a lot of us lived in the dorm, so we didn't have the hard part about living in New York. We lived in Lincoln Center, which was very glamorous, and just surrounded by absorbing all of this fantastic music making in a a specialized environment that you need at that age to really concentrate on what you're doing, because playing instruments is ridiculously difficult.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. I think a lot of people understand that it's hard, but they don't really understand how hard it is to be spectacular at it.
Right.
It's a lifelong, day-to-day endeavor.
You're never through. You never achieve it.
That's true. I think it was Martha Graham who said something like that being an artist is constantly being frustrated, that you never achieve what you're going for, but it's that striving
that's a good
that
thing.
Keeps you going.
Yes, right. And you sort of channel that into the energy that keeps you in the practice room.
So you're a student at Juilliard, and you're taking the train down to Harrisburg to play with the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra.
Right.
What memories do you have of that time, and what sticks out in your memory about the Harrisburg Symphony in the 90s?
Of course, first seeing the Forum. I was lucky enough to go in there the other day. It's such a stunning building, inside and out. I remember the first, because we get to rehearse there also, which is great.
We are very lucky in terms of that relationship.
Yes. I remember what it feels like. I remember the audience, the feeling of there was a great level of excitement in this audience, which you don't always find with classical audiences. And I remember a lot of the players who I've seen since, who have been here since then, and again, to speak to the sort of meeting everyone early, and they become a family, especially the musicians that travel to be here and spend 3 or 4 days together here and have known each other for many, many years, working and playing together.
Well, I remember when you came to visit for your interview weekend, the number of musicians, first of all, that were delighted to see you, which spoke a lot towards your candidacy, but also just the feeling of warmth. It's like, oh, an old friend has come to return.
It was a nice reunion. It really was. Yeah.
And so what did you notice in terms of similarities and in terms of differences when you heard the orchestra playing?
The orchestra is stunning. I mean, maybe it was. I have to be perfectly candid. I don't remember. I was a kid.
Really
good. I'm sure it was always a really good orchestra, but I remember the first notes of Till Eulenspiegel at the rehearsal that January whatever when I was here. No, it's really, really fantastic. Yeah. There's solid playing throughout all the ranks, right?
We are a very rare circumstance where there are extremely few weaknesses in our orchestra. Yeah. And that's, I feel like I'm the lucky beneficiary of that.
Well, you probably have something to do with the level of quality.
Oh, no, and I'm perfectly willing to own that. I'm very proud of the work that I've done with them.
Yeah.
But I will say that when I came, I was doing Ein Heldenleben for my audition. That was the first note that I heard.
Boy.
And as soon as it started, I was like, oh my God, I want this job.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea what to expect, and I felt like I was conducting the Chicago Symphony. It was quite remarkable. So let's get back to your story. Yes. So let's fast forward a little bit. At a certain point, you clearly made a choice that you didn't want to pursue cello as your career any longer, and you wanted to move into administration. Was there something that happened? Was it an evolution of feeling? I mean, how did that come about, and why did you make that decision?
I think it was pretty organic. I've always been interested in, and I think pretty good at, the behind-the-scenes sort of admin work. My very first job out of Juilliard was like my day job, which was very, very part-time. I mean, maybe 6 or 8 hours a week, was working at a tiny chamber music series in someone's apartment, which was a non-profit. It was a 501c3. We put on 4 or 5 concerts a year. They were subscription concerts, so you would buy a whole package, and it was in a room maybe 2 or 3 times this size for about 65 people. Everything I learned there is everything, the principles are all the same. Yeah. And I've always liked that idea of sort of setting something up and watching the audience and musicians interact. I mean, I liked being on stage. I don't miss it now, but there's something about sort of presenting and handing it off and watching the other people enjoy it. So that experience stuck with me from 95, 96, whenever that was. And then an opportunity came to me in Fayetteville, Arkansas with the Symphony of Northwest Arkansas in 2014, where I had been personnel manager. It was a very small shop, so the office there were 4 or 5 of us part-time, 1 full-time. So I got to understand the inner workings really quickly because we all work very closely together, and I thought, maybe this is time, maybe it's time to do this. And I haven't looked back, and it's not that I don't actively miss playing the cello. Like, I'll play cello for my own enjoyment, but not in public. And I think it's a good fit. I think I like the diversity, too, of relating to musicians and music director and board members and donors and audience. I mean, all the constituencies, all the stakeholders. I've either been one or I can relate to them well, I think, and that kind of ties it together.
Yeah, so in Fayetteville, Arkansas, in a sense, it really is a similar kind of orchestra as we have here, where musicians come from a lot of different places and gather together on a smaller scale, a shorter season in a smaller city. What were the things that particularly attracted you to coming to Harrisburg when you saw the announcement of the job opening?
Well, it was a homecoming. I mean, I wasn't looking for a job. I really was not. And I thought, wait a minute, the Harrisburg Symphony, and after a very long, distinguished tenure, these jobs are not open all that often. And if they are open often, there might be some problem that you don't want to get near, I mean, really, when I read it, it struck a lot. It brought back a lot of good memories of time here and music making here. And there's something to be said for coming home at a certain age.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, my parents are here. I have family here. It's nice to be back closer to the water, not just the Susquehanna. I mean, closer to the coast, right? We were landlocked for a long time.
Yeah, it's certain, and it's a beautiful area. That was kind of the big surprise for me coming to Harrisburg, is just how lovely this part of Pennsylvania is.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been tremendous growth, I'm sure, and I can't even tell because I wasn't I didn't know my way around all that well, but you can see a lot of stuff is
well,
going
I think you'll find, I mean, just looking at the 20 years that I've been here, the progress that the city has made in almost every sphere is really extraordinary. Certainly you'll find lots of great restaurants, lots of great cultural organizations, museums, everything that's going on here, and it's all in a very positive direction.
But there's still farmland, and it still feels like Pennsylvania.
That is
right?
for sure.
It still feels like, I mean, we grew up really in the heart of Amish country. I mean, there were a few miles and you were surrounded by Amish. And I like that feeling. That's very familiar to me.
So it would be crazy for me not to ask. You take this job, and literally a month or two later, this
like
pandemic happens. What has it been like making this enormous life change, moving to town, taking over an organization in crisis? Now, granted, every organization is in crisis.
Right.
Has it been frightening for you? Have you been like, what have I done? Why of all times to do this? What's your state of mind been like?
Mostly it's pretty optimistic. I mean, there are moments when I think, what have I done? But like you said, the whole industry is in crisis. This would be no different if I were anywhere, right? Because what we do is predicated on putting people together in an enclosed space or even an outdoor space, but we need a lot of people to do what we do. And that's the magic of an orchestra is you can't do it with fewer than those people. And even if the third clarinet part is missing, it's not the same piece. Everybody has a part to play. I'm optimistic because of the people at the table here, because of the board and the staff and the musicians, and we're all really, really working together. No one has a clear answer. No one knows when this is going to end or exactly what we're going to do to get from A to
If only there were clear answers to have.
Right.
We're really kind of on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis.
But Harrisburg Symphony's relationship with the community is very strong. And I can't take any credit for that because that happened before my time. But it's wonderful to walk into that and know that we can be honest with patrons and they will be honest with us. And we're just going to get through this together.
It has been incredibly gratifying to see the reaction of our patrons to this crisis and how supportive they've all been.
It's really inspiring. I think it makes us want to work even harder to treat them well and to bring the music in any sort of format that we can.
Yeah, and I think that's for the information of those people watching this video. That is how we are in fact approaching
what we're
things.
gonna do.
We know our mission is to present music to you, and we are going to do it in any way we possibly can.
Yeah.
And so with that, let's move to a slightly more optimistic question. What do you see as the future of the organization? What direction do you personally want to take this organization towards?
I think that we've done a lot of work. You've done a lot. I can't take credit because I wasn't here.
You are now part of we.
HSO has done a lot of work to bring music to new audiences in outside of the forum, throughout the community, or to bring the students or community members who may not otherwise get there to the forum. I think we need to continue to do that and build on that and remind people that we're here and listen. And while doing that, listen to them and see how we can address their needs based on their own, how they relate to art. Are we doing it right, or do we need to do it in a different way? Do you need a smaller dose? Do you want this on your phone? Do you want what can we do? I mean, of course, the root thing that we do is to preserve the art of music and live performance, right? Because this music it just sits in a book on a shelf if it's not. But I think the more we can connect with the community, the better off we'll all be.
And that leads to a good point. I mean, right now, if anything has been proven by this particular time in history,
yes,
it's how powerful the new technologies are.
Uh-huh.
How do you see those translating into the concert experience once all of this is done?
Wow, I'm kind of old-fashioned. You certainly can't replace the feeling of being in a room with what is it, 1,700 people, something like that. And it only happens once. Even if you get a record, this, you play a concert, you may think it went one way or another way. The next morning you listen to it and it's completely different and generally not nearly as exciting, right? But it's the same performance.
I hate watching videos
right.
of myself.
I know what you mean. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. Technology may allow us to reach people who don't want to leave their home or can't leave their home, or they want to take us with them when they're going somewhere else. And I'm talking about any age group or any background. I mean, it's not specific to anyone. I think it can only enhance what we do. But still, walking into the hall and hearing something live, there's really nothing like that. It's the same with sports. I mean, you watch sports live in a stadium, it's not the same as watching them on TV.
I'm a baseball fan, and so I did watch a little bit of opening day for baseball. And how odd is it to see people playing in an empty stadium? And you can only imagine that the players are just trying so hard to replicate the emotion without the cheers.
They're not getting it.
And I think, needless to say, I'm an enormous advocate of live music, and I think in addition to seeing the power of the technologies, we see in black and white just how limited they are.
Right.
They can do wonders for people that cannot come to the hall, but there still isn't a big gap between the very best technology and being there. And I think you nailed you hit the nail on the head in terms of your explanation of all that. And so I'm very optimistic because I do think that people crave that experience, both of music and of community. And what better place than the concert hall?
Right, since the beginning of time. I mean, this is not a new, coming together. Isn't it strange during the pandemic when we can't shake hands, we have to stay far apart. We can't. I mean, and when everyone's anxious about this horrible, strange thing that we don't quite understand, we can't huddle together and support one another. We have to sort of do it.
That's one of my biggest fears and sadnesses about looking towards the future, because people are saying, well, the handshake may never return. The hug may never return. Well, we finish a concert, I want to hug every member of the orchestra.
Yes, right.
Because we've been through this amazing experience together. So I hope we're able to come up with, if in fact the hug is gone, I hope we can come up with new ways that are equally intimate but safe. So one of the things that I wonder is what you like listening to when you're at work, you're listening to the orchestra play. When you're listening to music on your own, what music do you generally go to?
And first I'll answer the part of that's not a question. Listening to the orchestra outside, you know this, because where you stand, it's a different sound than it is in the audience. And I have gotten to be such a better audience member than I ever was by listening to so many orchestral concerts. I almost feel like it's more fun from the outside because when you're in the cello section, you're listening to yourself and the person next to you, and then the entire section, and then the strings, and then maybe the basses with the cellos, and then whatever. It's a lot. It's a very
lot of sound
active
between
thing.
everything else.
Right, but when you sit back, you think, "Oh, this is amazing!" Right? Because the sound you hear in the chair is really distorted. I mean, I wonder if people realize that. But when I'm not at a concert or a rehearsal listening, I listen a lot to music that I cannot play, like music for sopranos or soprano instruments like violins. I listen to keyboard music. I listen to music that I would never have, like I never listened to cello repertoire.
Wow.
Because I've heard it all.
Well, no, I guess
long
that makes
enough, right?
sense.
And like Bach violin sonatas, which I still don't really know that well. Scarlatti harpsichord sonatas. There was something on the radio the other day, and I thought, gosh, this is embarrassing. Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto, and I thought, I don't really know this piece. That's the hard one that no one can play. And I thought, I really need to learn this because I will probably never play it.
But it's spectacular.
And if you don't have to learn a piece to play it or conduct it, you approach it differently, right? Listening is a different...
Well, and do you ever listen to music as background? One of the things that I find myself is I can't listen to music as background.
I do sometimes, yeah.
That's lucky. I envy that.
Not always classical. That might be more jazz or sort of classic jazz.
And when you say classic jazz, like who in particular do you like listening to?
Like anything before 1940. Lee Wiley. Do you know Lee Wiley? She was a wonderful singer from probably the 30s and 40s.
Cool.
Billie Holiday. Those sort of, again, soprano, like the voice that I never had musically, I always am drawn to.
I think that's fascinating. Very cool. And lastly, when you're not involved in music, when you're not working, when you're not practicing cello, what do you like to do for fun? What are the things that are non-musical, extra-musical that you enjoy?
Honestly, napping is the first thing that comes to mind. Is that too honest for this show?
There is really no such thing as too honest for this show.
I'm thinking, I really like a little nap, or just 20, 25 minutes. Yard work. I like to spend time
and you have a big
outdoors.
yard.
We have a big yard with lots of work. I like handling food.
Cooking?
I don't really say cooking. I mean, cooking, I guess, but I think of it more as handling food.
Eating barbecue.
Right. No, I spend a lot of time in the kitchen, but napping is probably my favorite pastime. What does that say about me?
You heard it here first,
right.
Ladies and gentlemen. So thank you so much, Matt, for being the guinea pig in this new endeavor. We're thrilled to have you here. I'm speaking for myself, speaking for the whole organization. I think it's going to be a tremendously successful tenure. And I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to digging into the problems of today and planning for the opportunities of the future.
I'm right there with you.
Well, thank you so much. So now I thought it would be nice to play a little bit of music for you. This is a musical organization, after all. And in thinking about what I could play for you on the piano, one of the things that occurred to me is most everyone has heard me play most of the repertoire that I like to play. In 20 years, this is going to be the case. So I found something brand new. And when I say brand new, I mean 3 days ago I didn't know of the existence of this piece and have learned it since. It's a rag, and I chose a rag for a couple of reasons. One is I love playing ragtime. I do it quite a lot. But also because my piano is extremely out of tune, and I was thinking what kind of music would do okay with a fairly out of tune piano. And so I found this beautiful rag by a composer named Joseph Lamb, who came shortly after Scott Joplin and his contemporaries. It's a very beautiful rag, and it's quite a standard rag, you know, the same kinds of syncopations, the same kinds of harmonies, and it's called Ragtime Nightingale. Thank you so much for joining us for this, the first in what I hope will be a long series of videos featuring various members of the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra family. I hope you found it interesting. If you have comments, you can leave them in the comments section below the video on the YouTube page. But we very much want your feedback. Are there things that you'd like us to address in the future? Are there questions you'd like us to answer? Or are there people that you particularly would like me to interview? So please do let us know. The other thing I'd like to announce is that soon we will be releasing our second in this series. And that video will feature me interviewing our wonderful Principal Oboist, Andreas Oeste, who not only plays Principal Oboe with the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra, but just recently took a full-time faculty position teaching oboe at Penn State University. So look out for that. And lastly, look out for announcements about our upcoming season. We've called it a season like no other, and I can promise you it will be just that, a season like no other, filled with exciting and very different kinds of musical offerings. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being with us today. This is Stuart Malina signing off. See you next time.